Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to the Simply Financial podcast. This is episode number 51 of season number 4. So, on today's episode, I have Cody Loughlin joining me. He is a financial expert, podcast host, and entrepreneur. He, after spending 20 years in financing and opening 13 businesses as a serial entrepreneur, he has discovered the secrets to being financially free and the point in our lives that we need it most in our schools, because his view is schools are failing to teach anything about what money is and how it really works. So his mission at this point in his life is to change young people's financial trajectory. I have trouble saying that word, trajectory, through education and helping parents talk to their kids about money. Cody, I appreciate you spending some time with me today.
Chris, I'm excited, man. I'm really excited. You'd mentioned to me you might be a financial geek, and it's just nice to be on a Zoom call with another financial geek. So I'm excited, man.
Very good. So you have a very successful podcast. It's Money
Talkers.
And one of the major components of the show, and I've been a guest on your show, I don't know if it's been published yet or not, and having listened to several episodes, is you really want to help empower parents to have constructive conversations with their children to help educate their children so that they could be wiser with money. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. My goal in this, by educating with kids, is that they may not be wealthy in money, but they are wealthy in time. And both of those two factors can have a massive impact on where they end up in life later down the road. And to help parents empower them to be able to speak to their kids became very apparent when I started asking questions to parents like, should we teach about money? Should we teach about entrepreneurship? Should we teach about successful mindsets in school? Well, I have yet to meet a single person on this planet that is like, I am really glad I did not learn about any of those things, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was like, yeah, why aren't we teaching about these things? It's crazy, right? And so, and then I say, well, where did you talk about it in your house, or did you talk about it in your house when you're growing up? What's your money story? And without a doubt, I mean, 99% of the people I talk to are like, oh no, we don't talk about money in my house, or a little bit, we're trying, which means no, and the same thing. And so I for my goal, it's okay, well, how do we bridge that gap, right? How do we connect the parents with their kids? Because in my mind, the kids, or my parent, is the one person on the planet who wants nothing, like they want nothing but the best things for you, right? And so why would we not want to connect them in those avenues?
So do you think, and this isn't actually where I thought we would start this conversation, but do you think some of this is generational? So, I'm 50. I think we're probably the same generation. I think I might have a few years on you though. But do you think some of this is generational? Because I'm going to make fun of my dad now for a little bit. And, I know he listens to the show, so let me just apologize in advance, Dad. But I remember growing up, my dad was a middle guy in corporate America. We were not wealthy, lower middle class. But I remember on a few occasions, something happened in our financial life. He got a raise, and he would say to me and my two brothers, don't tell anybody. And it was comedy, because who are we going to tell? I'm 12, Dad. I'm playing Little League. Like, who really cares about this? I find that I'm more open with my kids, but I'm not sure if that's because I'm a financial planner. So, my business world revolves around money, and I wouldn't say it's an unhealthy relationship with money. It's just that I'm a certified financial planner, and this is my area of expertise and what I've been immersed in over my 28 years. So I find I'm more open, way more open than my kids. Although, truth be told, I'll tell my kids on occasion, this is for internal use only. You don't tell other people, kind of like my dad. But do you think it's a generational difference? Are we more open than our parents were, and in turn, their parents, do you think?
Yeah, so in that general regard, I don't necessarily know that it's generational, but at some point somebody changes the tree, right? At some point, hopefully, someone comes in and intentionally starts to teach their kids about it. So I would ask you this, like, if your dad was a roofer, and he talked to you about how to swing a hammer, it wouldn't be out of the norm, right? So dad's a certified financial planner, and he talks to me about how money works. It's just a tool, right? And when we begin to master these tools and we use the tactics to do them, we see successful results. Same thing as using another tool, right? And so for me, when I think about generational changes, it's usually because someone in the family has either taken a different approach or intentionally decided that they were going to change the money story going forward, because we all have a money story. Like you mentioned, yours was dad, held it tight to the vest, right? Tight to the vest. That's the way it works. Like, I'm going to celebrate with you a little bit, but so that gives you a framework of how you see the world with money and how you see the worry to act with it and do those things. You mentioned that early in high school, you got really excited and into money topics and finance, and you wanted to go that route and do those things. So your money story got a new chapter, right? And as you go down to these things, where you're at in life, whether you are completely anti-money, it's the root of all evil, whether you're kind of nonchalant about it, whether you're actively, I want to be better with it, but I don't know how, or you're, I fully immersed and you're a certified financial planner, you've written a story all the way through with your life, right? And at some point, you can't do anything about what the chapters that have already been written, but you can write the end of the book depending on what goals you want to end up to. And so we have this choice that's innately given to us of when we want to take action. And so when I hear about, like, as we're kind of talking through this with being, is it generational? I don't necessarily think that. I think you just took a different choice, right? You started writing a different story. And what's amazing about that is that there is an empowerment inside of knowing that you have the choice to change the trajectory for your kids. So my question back to you would be, do you think your kids are more financially educated than you were when you graduated high school?
Oh, I mean, my daughter's 20 and my son is 14. And yes, they have a much greater awareness of money and financial concepts in a way more knowledgeable than I was after high school. But you could kind of say that about a lot of subjects too, though, Cody.
I agree. But this is the one that we're on. But two, there's a lot of subjects that are very taboo, right? And this falls in there.
Yes.
For parents, the biggest anxiety piece of parents being able to talk to their kids is birds and bees and money, right? I don't want to be a birds and bees expert, so I'm decided to tackle money.
Yeah.
but that's the thing is, like, as you educate them and you're very comfortable around it, you're not the norm, Chris, right? You've been in financial planning for almost 30 years. You're comfortable, right? So it doesn't make you uncomfortable. But if you've been a plumber for 30 years and your kids try to talk to you about money, you might not be so comfortable. And this is my goal, is to give parents the tools to say, okay, I don't need to be a master certified financial planner to open the conversations up in my house about money, regardless of whether I've made mistakes along the way or not, or I'm not a financial guru or financial geek. Like, what do I have to tell my kids? Right. And that's not the right way to look at it, because you have experience, you have life. There are pieces you can do, or you can go learn together, because again, what's been written about us as our financial story and our money story, you can't change, but you can change what's written about it going forward.
All right. That's awesome. So here's where I thought we would start the conversation. I'm curious about you. You have an unbelievable biography and a rich history of business experiences. So let's talk about your early years. Can you describe for us the home you grew up in? Did you grow up in a rich household? Was it poor, lower middle class? How would you characterize it?
We went through a lot of transition in my household, and I think it helped shape the way I see things. So originally, my father was a salesman, and we moved a lot when I was really little, and we went from Washington State to Florida, which is just about as far as you can go.
Yeah.
All right. In 3 years. And so we ended up in Central Florida, and, little apartment. And actually what's kind of funny is my bedroom was actually the walk-in closet when we first got there. Right. And so my mom didn't work, and we never wanted for anything. But we were not on the on the radar as far as in the wealth category. And so saw my dad work really hard. And and what's really funny is I didn't realize it at the time, but what you would call it now is I saw him do a lot of side hustles.
Okay.
So he tried to do a lot of little business deals here and there, and he would take me along with him, and I didn't really realize he was planting seeds. And then my mom started one because she got tired of hearing, well, you don't have, get a job. He would always mess with her, and like, so she said, okay, fine. So she opened one. She opened a company, and she saw really good success. And my dad saw some success, and so we moved up the ladder pretty quickly. And so I saw that entrepreneurial piece and how that drove some, it changed our family tree by being able to go out and chase a dream. I was in there licking envelopes and mailing out in stamps and mailing them out to people for a nickel a piece on Saturdays. And my parents talked to me a lot about business and entrepreneurship, and I heard you can be whatever you want to be a lot. And so that was really ingrained in me. On the flip side of that is, I don't know that looking back, I'm trying to think of it, but like, we never talked about like budgeting or, how a checking account works or, any of the basic personal financial stuff. And later in life got me in a little bit of trouble by not having that base, I think.
So you mentioned that you did learn about the benefits of having an entrepreneurial spirit. Any other lessons, things that you learned about money growing up? What are some of your earlier memories on the subject?
I was an extreme saver. I got that. I don't know if we're born with an entrepreneurial gene or if it's something that we emulate, but I definitely had it. So I was always doing hustles. I played a lot of sports, but even then my weekends, if I didn't have sports, I was working for something. And so I had, at the time, I saved a lot of money. I saved most of the stuff that I made. I never wanted to buy anything. And so, it was a little bit weird. I kept all my birthday money. But in the same household, my sister did the exact opposite. So it was like every dollar in was two out. And so
that happens a lot.
And it's just, I think it comes part of just your personality traits and the way we work on things. And, but I didn't, I do know one very glaring memory, and I was in 6th grade, and my mom had started this company, and it was about a year and a half afterwards, and they were doing taxes and some sort of reconciliation, and her partner had embezzled out close to $90,000. And in the first year of a company, that's basically a killer. And she thought she was struggling really bad. She thought she wasn't really good at running this company and couldn't figure out where the money went. And then this came up, and I remember her being devastated. But as my mom was known to say before she passed away, she said, I just pulled my bootstraps up. Mm-hmm. And so I got that ingrained in me because I watched what she did. And she basically went in, kicked him out, took over 100% of the company, and within 3 years had grown it to 12 employees, and was just she went in, and she was not an entrepreneur by a classic sense, as if you say, well, you went to business school or anything like that. She was a grinder, and she went in and just and went after it and said, you know what, I'm in a bad situation. What am I going to do about it? And there was another point in my life that came up, and my wife said it to me when we were in just absolute dire financial straits. And she said that, and it just kind of clicked, and I said, well, I'm going to go do something about it. I'm going to pull my bootstraps up. And so I got a lot of that out of my parents growing up was, I got a lot of baseball lessons from my dad, and then from my mom, just a lot of grit things of saying, like we're not victims, we're in charge of taking care of things. If something bad happens to you, get up and take care of it, get up and do something about it. And I think that's really served me really well in my entrepreneurial life. It's like that old Rocky thing. It's like, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you can get up. Right.
I love that. I'm going to screw up the quote or the adage, but where do you go when you're in trouble? You go to work.
I like that.
It's something like that.
I like that. And I got another thing too. This was literally, so those are my two favorite sayings. I give you both of them. My second one is from Henry Ford, and he said, you cannot build your reputation on what you're going to do. So when you're going to do something and you're going to go out and build something, you're going to make something of yourself or whatever it is, go do it and then show others how you did it. But don't tell everybody how great you're going to be because until you do it, you can't earn a reputation. Doesn't matter who you are, you cannot earn a reputation with what you're going to do.
Very good.
A lot of talkers, right?
Yeah.
And so, go do the work. Go do the work and then talk to me. And when you do that, you earn respect, you earn reputation, you earn, some seat at the table, basically.
So what money rules do you have?
So at this point in my life, I don't do anything with consumer debt. I don't do anything with debt that I don't want. I don't like paying triple for things, right? I was teaching a little bit with some kids. They're in junior high, and I have a Lowe's card that you get 5% off or 10% off every time you use it. But the reason they give you these cards, obviously, is because they charge you 25% interest if you don't pay the balance off, right?
Yes.
So I forgot to do this one month. I paid it off religiously before the date, which if you really want a credit secret, that's one of the ones that I would throw out there. If you ever want to improve your credit score, pay your balance off before the end of the statement date. It is the easiest way to pop a credit score 30 or 40 points. But long story short, I forgot to do it this one month, and I was going to speak to these kids, and they opened up this Lowe's bill, and it's like, you owe $4,000, and if you take the minimum payments, it's going to take 17 years, and you're going to pay back $13,500. And I'm like, this is insane. So I literally took this bill with me to go talk when I was going to talk to these kids. And I was like, and they were like, why, how is that? Why is that? And I'm like, look, this game isn't set up for you to win, right? This game is set up for the interest. The guy, you need to be the bank or be the borrower. It's way better to be the bank, right? It's way better to earn the interest than pay the interest. And so I was showing these kids and I was like, would you pay $9 for this Gatorade? And they were like, no. And I'm like, would you pay $78 for a Domino's pizza? They're like, no, and I'm like, your sneakers right there. How much were they? The kid's like $90. I was like, did you pay $400 for them? No. I'm like, then don't use consumer debt.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're going to do over your lifetime. And on top of that, you're going to rob yourself of the ability to invest. And so I live by a lot of little simple rules.
Okay. So the consumer debt's a good one.
Yeah. I don't like paying interest unless it's somebody else paying it for me. Right. So I would definitely dive into the idea between assets and liabilities. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, not something that you pay for, no matter how expensive it is. You buy a piece of luggage for $5,000, that is not an asset. You buy a piece of luggage for $5,000 that you rent out for $1,000 a month, and it pays for itself in 5 months, and after that it brings you $1,000 a month for renting it out. That's an asset, puts money in your pocket. And so some of these basic concepts where you need to be able to tell your money where to go. You need to look at your money, right? I think that's one of the biggest small things that you can do is track your money. We talked about it a little bit, but the second that I started tracking my net worth, and even though it was highly negative at the time, and I was certain that I was going to retire in 10 years, I worked my plan backwards. So I love setting goals, and I love working plans backwards into small bite-sized pieces. And then literally tracking to where I am against those bite-sized pieces. We had talked about some of your wealth rules, and those are one of the, that was one for me that jumps out big time. Is that you need to, whatever you put light on shines, right? So what I mean by that is if you pay attention to your finances will be better than they were if you don't pay attention to them, right?
Oh yeah.
If you pay attention to the words that you use. I'm a big person on word choice. I don't like, there's a lot of little pieces in there where I can't, or I'm not willing to, right?
Yeah.
Say one or the other, it makes totally different things, right? I can't. And then another one is, and if you really want to get into the positive side of it, is how do I, right? So if we use I can't as a swear jar at my house, right? And so it forces you to think, how can I achieve something, as opposed to taking the excuse and not having any personal responsibility for my can't. Yes.
I want your thoughts on this, because one of the expressions that I am definitely against is I had to. And there's very few times when you have to do something, but people throw that around often to explain bad behavior or bad decision making. And everything is a choice. So I don't want to speak badly, but I had a particular client, and they had an older vehicle, and he had a little bit of a change in his health circumstances So what they described is that they had to go buy the $65,000 vehicle that they financed the whole thing. But it's a choice. It's a choice. They didn't have to do that. They may have had to get a different vehicle, but they didn't have to go spend $65,000 and borrow the entire amount of money. So I try and be careful about the I have to. There's very few things that I have to do, probably very few things that you have to do. Most of what we do is a choice, and there's a range of options that we could select from. And I try and be careful about that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey. I don't know. I'm glad you brought this up, Chris. That's why we talk so well. But there's a piece in Stephen Covey's work in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People that talks about choice, right? It says it's the only thing that God gives you. And, I sat on that for a while, and I was trying to understand what that means. And all of the reactions or all of the results that we end up through become from the choices that we made prior to those results, right? And so I am a huge proponent of you made your choice, right?
Yeah.
If you want to do, this is where when I got my business to really accelerate. So I had 120 employees, and one of the things we did is I started empowering them to make decisions, because it was very apparent that I was at the top and trying to make every little decision that made no sense. And so I said, okay, here's the deal. I was like, when you were faced with a decision, if it doesn't exceed $500 worth of damage to the company, if you're wrong, make the choice yourself. I said, but here's the deal. When I ask you, why did you make that decision? You cannot say, I don't know. Right? You need to say, I made this decision because this was the best. This was the information I had at the time, and I tried to make the best decision possible. Right? And so what our rule was you couldn't say, I don't know, or else then you were actually going to be in trouble. Right? Or you also had to say, okay, this is the way I was looking at the information I did, and this is the decision I made. This is where I went wrong, because you're teaching to think. And so what you're talking about with people that, when they say I had to, right? Those are in the powerful pieces of the words that says, I didn't make a bad decision, Chris. That's what life did to me.
Yeah.
Right.
I had to.
I'm off the hook. It's not my fault. Yeah. It's the same thing as saying I can't. Right. And so that piece where those words go from scarcity mentality and, release of personal, culpability to, all right, I made a bad choice, or this is how I'm going to make a better choice in the future. And we have all these little time, you're talking about a big $65,000 purchase. These happen all day long.
Sure.
Right. Like, oh man, I'm bad with money. You will always be bad with money if you keep saying I'm bad with money, because you're allowed to now be bad with money, and you don't have to make the decisions that you don't want to.
Right.
Right. And so you're just releasing your responsibility by using these words. And when you repeat things like this, if you change that mentality, actually, I will tell you this one thing. So I've interviewed a neuroscientologist that says that your brain seeks to validate the things that you say and the things that you consume. Right. And so if you say, I am bad with money, your brain is going to validate that by helping. It's subconsciously going to help you make bad decisions with money, because it's going to validate the words and the way that you think.
And it lets you off the hook. Like, well, I'm going to do this. I kind of know it's bad, but we already know I'm bad with money, so this fits.
And
with the story.
Subconsciously, you're fighting it too, right? So it's not only just does it get you off the hook with the excuse, and that's you verbally saying that, but also it's going to validate that by having you think that way about money. Sure. And I was like, that is amazing. And so as I dug more and more into this kind of research, like, you can do it the other way though, which is amazing, right? So so that's the paradigm shift of the Covey stuff, right? So the one is like, okay, I'm really bad with money, or, I'm trying to quit smoking, right? Oh, okay. So you're trying, so you're good. Or you say, I am not a smoker, and watch what the success rate does. I am good with money. Your brain will seek to validate the thoughts and the pieces that you use your words. And so that's why, to me, we talked about we got into this about money rules, But one of the things is it starts between your ears, man. It really does. Right. And so if you are intentionally seeking out things that are good for you, or if you find yourself saying I'm bad with money, right? Then, okay, well, how do I get good with money? Right. You can't say I can't, but if you say, how do I get good with money? Then you start to say, okay, well, maybe I should listen to more podcasts. Maybe I should watch things on YouTube. Maybe I should pick up a book, right? And do these things. And so now you're actually taking intentional learning and intentional speaking and your brain will then start to work and see things differently. You'll see the world differently, really.
So next I wanted to ask you, I think I heard this, you talk about this in one of your podcasts, but you had some adversity, and you alluded to it before with your negative net worth, but you had some adversity, I think, when you were in your 20s. Can you tell us about that and share with us some of the lessons you learned from that difficult experience?
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put that.
Yeah, did I finesse that okay?
Yeah. You suck with money, and this, can you tell us how you don't do that anymore? Like, yeah, that'd be much better probably. But no. So basically my goal at 19 years old, I lost my dad. We were super close. I didn't understand. I got a real shock with, like, I don't really understand anything about money. Like, and I was just become a finance major. Right. And so I was in a class, I learned about compound interest. And then at the same time, I was also bartending, and there happened to be a guy come in, and he gave me the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I had never read a book for fun in my life. Right. So he gives me this, he says, read this book, you'll get rich. I read this thing. He says, I said, okay, as soon as I had these two things, I said, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. And 90% of people probably laughing at me behind my back, but I would tell people, I'm like, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. Like, I have a plan. And they're like, okay. So at 27 years old, I fast forward a bit. I own 4 companies. I have a condo on the beach. I've got rental properties. All 4 companies are in South Florida. All 4 companies are real estate related, right? And so I became, on paper, a millionaire at the age of 27 years old. It was, I thought I was on a rocket. I thought I was just crushing it. I didn't realize it was a bottle rocket, and it blew up halfway through the air, and I had no parachute. And so fast forward 1 year from then, and I've got 0 companies. I've got 2 foreclosures, and I have IRS liens. All the money that I was about to be making that year, which was substantial. I mean, we're talking, I was about to have 7-figure paydays on some deals as Lehman Brothers went out and all that stuff. And so I was just levered to the hill, and I never worried about it because I was a super optimistic entrepreneur. Right. And we kind of mentioned this in my podcast when we were talking, was that optimism is an amazing driver, but it can be blinders as well to the reality of where you're at with your life. And so I was completely that way. And so at 28 years old, I was sitting in my foreclosed condo looking at the beach with my wife. And she was like, how bad is it? And I was like, it's really, really bad. And she's, I tell people, I joke about it, that I wished I was broke at the time because I was $700,000 in the hole and I had no job. I was, nobody wanted to interview me. It was just like, woe is me for about a few months. And we were sitting out there, and she looked at me and she said, what are you going to do about it? And I just heard my mom my whole life doing those things. You know what I'm going to do? I was like, I'm going to go out there, and I was like, I'm going to be realistic about what I don't know. So I have 0 understanding of how to run a business. I'm 28. I had 4 companies doing $1 million revenues. And I had to admit to myself, I have no idea how to run a company.
Amazing.
Right. And I had to be realistic, and I had to look in the mirror, and I said, okay, here's the other thing I need. I was like, I need a goal. Like, I am just wallowing. I'm floating by. Like, I don't know where to go. I was like, because I'm not aiming at anything. So I need a goal. And I said, I want to be retired by the time I'm 39. And she's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no. I'm like, I want to retire at 39. She's like, how in the hell are we going to get there? I'm like, I don't know. I was like, but I got 11 years to get there. And I'm going to find out. And this is what I'm going to do. How do you retire in 10 years? And I started just digging, and I said, okay, I need a plan. I don't know how to run businesses. Well, business ownership is the fastest path to wealth. It's the most risky, which I had just found out. And so I said, okay, I need to know how to run a business. Who goes in a lot of businesses? Bankers. All right, I'm going to be a banker. right? And I and I started applying all over the place to be a banker. Fortunately, there's a story, and there's a pretty good story in there about how I actually got an interview and what happened. But long story short, I got to be a commercial banker in the worst time in the history of the United States to be a banker, 2008, 2009, 2010.
Fun times.
Oh yeah, we were toxic. And so here I am walking into businesses, and I went into thousands of them because the boss at the time said, well, we hired you, but you're going to be the first one we fire when we go through this restructuring. I was like, oh no, I'm not. Like, tell me how I'm not the first one fired. And he goes, make yourself unfireable. And this guy had to wait. He had like that Yogi Berra, like he said things to me and it was just like it clicked. He goes, make yourself unfireable. I was like, all right. He goes, you can't be mediocre. You can't be near the top. You better be so unfireable that when they call me, I got to tell them I cannot fire you because the whole thing will collapse. Mm-hmm. So, okay, great. So I had outworked everybody else I was on teams with. They were making, 30, 40 phone calls a week to business owners. I was making 100 plus a day, cause I was like, sometimes you got to do that, man. When you're that far behind the 8 ball, you need to make it up. Right. And you need to do above and beyond and change that trajectory. And so I did those things. I walked into thousands of businesses. I started seeing patterns, which is, for me, it's been really lucky in my life, is that I can recognize patterns when I see them. And as I was going into businesses, I had people all the time at that time ask me, what business should I go into? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I got rich doctors and I got poor doctors. I got, I got a toy maker who's making tons and tons of money. And I got this guy who's, been in business for 40 years and he's entrepreneurial poor. And they're like, well, what's the difference? I'm like, you got to be a business owner. I'm like, you got to know your numbers. You got to review your numbers. I was like, I don't know how to read a P&L, but I know I have to know how to read a P&L to be successful, because within 10 minutes of me walking into the business, if I said, hey man, how are you doing this month? Where are you at this month versus last month? Where are you at this year versus last year? If the guy knew the answers and I said, do you have a P&L? And he said, yeah, hold on a second. Prints one off for me. I was pretty good shape. But if I said, where are you at this month versus last month? Pretty good. No, specifically, I don't know. Well, can I have a P&L? Profit and loss statement. Sorry. He said, yeah, I'll call the accountant and then I'll have them put one together for you. And when's the last time you looked at it? Well, beginning of the year. Yeah. Like, oh no. Like, I knew their loans were bad. I knew business was bad. Like, I knew there was some writing on the wall most likely coming down the pike. And so when I got my next opportunity, I've always known how to make the bell ring, right? More leads, better conversion. Smallest thing ever. You got more opportunity, more swings at the bat, the better you are at hitting the ball. It's baseball, right? So I knew how to make the bell ring for my other companies, but I didn't understand how to run a company until I got into companies. And I was like, at the end of the year, I just walked with a shoebox and bank statements and some pile of receipts and gave it to the accountant. I'm like, let me know, So like, and it came back to bite me. So the second time around, now I had put enough, seeds in the ground for myself to learn. And I went to work for an RV dealership with the promise of that maybe the employees that could survive would, or they could handle it, would be the opportunity to buy it out. We took that dealership from $9 million a year to $51 million a year. In the middle of the process, we bought it. We expanded from 25 employees to 120, 4 locations, and we got bought out by a publicly traded company. Along the way, I paid back all of my debt. I paid it all off during the period of doing that. And I wasn't making, ungodly amounts of money as the owner, because I was entrepreneurial poor, because I financed the whole thing from the previous owner. And so I did the taking leftovers to work, and I did the analysis of what I'm doing with my money. I started this net worth spreadsheet that I made that listed all my assets, listed my liabilities, and negative amount. I can't even remember what the number was at the bottom to begin with, but it was 6 figures in the wrong way. And then every day every month I was sub 500 credit score. And I started getting involved, and I started watching my own numbers. I applied that business lesson that I learned from the successful business people. And even though I was an employee at the time, I wasn't going to be for long, but I was going to need to prepare myself to go back to battle by being debt free, by switching that net worth number from negative to positive of $100. It didn't matter, because the second I got $100 down there, it was go time, man. I was back. I felt like I was rich. And, but I had built these habits in myself at that point that it just continued down the path. And at 39 years old, I was technically FIRE retired. I had more passive income than I had bills.
That is a great American success story. In terms of your work, your mission, helping parents, their kids in financial education, how do you approach a family, parents who, let's just kind of paint a picture. They may not have achieved the level of financial success they may have hoped for. They may be ignorant about money or maybe intimidated. They may have gotten knocked around in life, whatever. But how would you counsel them to discuss finances with their children? And part of the reason for the question, Cody, is that I'm a big believer in more is caught than taught. I mean, kids are watching what you do, whether you know it or not. That's really that's where they're going to get most of their information from. And I'm not saying I support fully your idea about having conversations, but I also know that kids are watching and they're observing and they're learning through that. So for parents, they may not have achieved financial success, but they love their kids and they want their kids to achieve the American dream and do better than they did. How would you counsel them to talk to their children?
Sure. That's a fantastic question. The first step for me would be like setting for any goals is one, defining what you want and determining your why you want it. Right. So for me, when I was 28, and I said, I want to be retired by the time I'm 39. And so I had a goal. Right. And then I backed into that goal and I said, what do I need to do? And then I started making, items that I needed to cross off, but that wasn't my why. Right. My why was because I never wanted to be in a situation that I wouldn't be able to go see my kids play ball games when they got older because my dad did. Right. And so when I needed to make tough decisions, I could always place my why next to the decision that I needed to make. And it was easy. If I didn't need to spend that extra dollar, it was fine because I was working towards a goal and I had a plan and I had a why of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be in the situation that I was in ever again. It hurt so bad. I tell people now like, oh, it's a great success story. It wasn't a success story when I was in it. Right. And people say, well, if you ask me now, like, would I want you, would I change anything? And I'd go, no, I needed to learn those lessons bad. If you had asked me at the time, would you change this? I'd have been like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this. This is awful. Right. And so when you talk about, we alluded to it earlier about where your money story is. Right. And so identifying, you don't need to do your previous money story with your kids. Okay. You don't need to talk to them about why your influences are there, what the mistakes are that you made, and why you're at where you're at in life. Because I don't think anybody really is ever where they are fully satisfied where they thought they'd be when they were growing up, right? Like I never made it to the big leagues, so I can't just throw my hands up and be like, well, my life's over because I didn't make the major leagues. And so when we talk about just in a general family household, and they say, okay, I want a better life for my kids. Okay. You need to not use it as a cliche. Like you need to explore that. Like, why do you want a better life for your kids? Okay. So I want a better life for my kids because I don't want them to struggle as much as I have. Okay. So why have you struggled as much as you have? What's your money story? What were your influences? What's the way you think about things? Now understand that you have control. And when you have control, you can say, okay, it's time to change this. But when I go to make these changes, they're not going to be comfortable. They're not easy decisions, right? The conversations that we have with our kids, I would tell you that you'd be much better served asking open-ended questions and finding out what your kids are thinking so that you can have the conversations, then you will be teaching lessons to them, right? They hear lessons all the time. I took English class for 12 years. I'm a terrible speller. No, you can't force it into me. I didn't want to learn it. It doesn't matter to me where the comma goes in my mind because I'm not geared that way. And so with kids, like when you ask open-ended questions about what they're thinking about, or if you're in the realm of saying, okay, we may need to go learn this together. Or I'm going to go learn it and be one step ahead of you so that when I talk to you about it, that we can have an open conversation and I'm a little bit more of an expert to it. Are you going to be uncomfortable? Yeah. Is your uncomfortableness worth more than your why? Do you want your kids to struggle the way that you have? Because if you don't break the pattern and you don't start the conversations, they're destined to do the same thing that you did, right? It's just the same way we talked about copying success. You can also change the way that that success is portrayed. Like if you had a financial education going out into the world, are you going to be better off than if you've gotten zero financial education? No, right? I mean, you're going to be way better off if you've had conversations, and if you started to dive into subjects. You don't need to understand how to do puts and calls on stock trading to be able to talk to your kid about a good way to balance their checkbook, or better these days, balance your debit card, right? You don't need to be a master of finance to sit your kids down in front of a retirement calculator and go, look, when you're 16 to 76, if you put $40 a month away, you're going to have $2 million because you have a lot of time. They go, what? Go watch YouTube videos yourself and then report back with your kids. Go have your kids watch YouTube videos, or have them read a book and report back to you, and give them some sort of reward, because kids need small wins. We talked about short-term goals, mid-term goals, and long-term goals. Kids need to compress that space down. So like with my kids, they're little guys, and so their goals, if they do something and I say, I'm going to give you $2 if you accomplish this task, when they accomplish the task, I need to give them those $2 right then, right? Because it's just a little win. And they start to see that there's patterns and there's pieces that they can start to plant these seeds that are going to come up later. Your kids don't need to be financial gurus, but the idea that they are now going to be at least armed with some knowledge is going to change that. Is what we talked about earlier when you said, well, I talked to my kids about it. Is it generational? Chris, you made the decision to do that, right? Most people have a trepidation inside and an anxiety saying, well, I can't talk to my kids about money. Look where I'm at. Or I can't talk to my kids about money. Like, it's not a good, and I don't know anything about finance. You don't need to be this super expert. And if you're listening to this podcast, then you're probably already in the mindset of intentional listening and bettering yourself so that you can talk to your kids about it, right? You're already there. It's kind of like we talked about, like, when I asked you about, like, what's your advice for people that come to your office? And you're like, well, the people that come to my office are seeking for certified financial planners. Like, they've already made that decision. So you're in a different piece of conversation, right? So the average family, I would say the step to do would be to start to seek the information, even if you don't have it. The ones who already have the information is to start opening the conversations little by little. They don't need to be big dissertations. You don't need hour-long PowerPoint presentations. Just ask your kids, hey, you know what? What kind of interest grows, do you have that you might think you want to do when you grow up? And they're going to say, what? I don't know. And then you're going to say, what do you want to be, a doctor or a lawyer? Like, because there's only two jobs in the world. And so, and then they say, well, no, I love video games. Well, go down the rabbit hole with them and explore what video games are, Hey, someone has to come up with the concept. Someone has to be the illustrator. Someone has to program it and code it. Someone has to be the marketer. Someone has to be the one that puts it into the DVD case. Someone has to fly it around the country. Someone has to, do customer service when things break. And someone has to do, the presentation for the next one. And how do you get investors in? And there's all these jobs along the line of video games. And then you can talk about, listen, the guy who solves the biggest problems generally makes the most money. Right? The one who has the biggest and quantifiable end results makes the most money. And there's these pieces where you can start to just have little conversations. And I'm kind of making it bigger than it needs to be when you're talking to kids. But it's literally just being the fact that they can open up and talk to you, because their money decisions at 15 years old are not that big.
Yes.
But it's the idea that they can talk to you about it is humongous.
Yeah, the open communication is crucial. That's a great answer. Let me flip it around a little bit. And the second question is a little bit more personal for me, because it's something that I think about a lot as a parent, is what challenges are there for parents who have achieved financial success and educating their kids? And so the background with this is, your story about bootstrapping it and coming from relatively humble means. It doesn't sound like you were living on the streets or anything, but relatively humble means. And it seems by all accounts, you've achieved the American dream and have had ample financial success. There's a risk of spoiling your kids. And I'll give you my quick story, Cody. I think I've communicated this on the podcast before, but my son's 14 now, but about 3 or 4 years ago, He's 10 or 11 years old, and we were going to go out to dinner. And it wasn't for anything in particular, but, you know, we asked the kid, you know, we're going to go out to dinner. What do you think? Where would you like to go? And my 10-year-old son is like, I could go for a really good steak. And I'm like, what the blank is going on here? I don't know if I had a really good steak until I was a grown man. And, you know, you want to give your kids a nice life, and I want to enjoy the fruits of my success. But they don't see the early years, the edge that you needed to have early on, the resiliency that they only really see now, you know, a 45-year-old man, not the 21-year-old trying to figure things out, working incredibly hard, and not having ample financial resources for a good portion of their young life as adults. So what are the challenge for parents educating their kids with the risk of perhaps spoiling their kids because they don't have it as tough as their old man did?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. My thoughts around this are under the word appreciation, right? And so we talk about that a lot in my household. I think it's a lot of pieces where, you know, you are leading by example. And if you, like you mentioned earlier, more is caught than taught, you need to make sure that you're also having that appreciation in front of them. Would be some of, you know, that would be my mindset, is that I need to show appreciation for the things that come in, and I need to be talking about them consistently. But ultimately, you know, what did we talk about earlier? You want your kids to have a better life than you, right? So you can't be too mad about being able to provide that to them. But I think that there's going to be some opportunities that come out that you want to load them with the information, but I really believe that they're going to need to have some experiences. You know, at this point at 14, it's going to be tough to tell them what life's going to be like when they get out. The same way that Chris probably didn't listen when he was 14 years old to say, well, life's going to be tough when you get out there, get going. And you're like, yeah, it's easy, you know? And so it's, for me, is giving them the tools that they need to succeed, but not guaranteeing their success, right? And so I want them to have good experiences. I want them to have that bootstrap piece. I want to be talking about that when I'm in front of them, but I also want to show them that there's a lot out there to go get, and that, you know, there will be times in my life where I will explain these situations that I went through with them. I think that those are going to be a little bit more appropriate as they get older. And so that maybe there's some storyline there for if they have some struggle as a backbone to push off of it. But as they're growing up, I really talk to them quite a bit about being able to be appreciative, being able to, you know, we didn't have a lot of means when I was a kid growing up. By the time I graduated high school, we was in a, you know, pretty nice middle income house. It was, my parents had done well over the years, and I watched them with their success. So I was kind of part of it as I was growing up. That's where my bootstrap piece came from. That and sports was a big piece for me. But I would tell you at 7 years, I think it was 7 or 8 years old, we were at one of those like Chinese buffet type deals, you know, right. And my dad made me eat crab legs. And first time I had a crab leg, I was like, this is the most enjoyable, delicious thing I've ever eaten in my entire life. I can soak it in butter, and this is amazing, but takes a really long time to eat one. So we ended up sitting there for an hour and a half with him cracking crab legs for me, and I was just taking them down. Well, what do you think I asked for every time we went into a restaurant? I went into McDonald's. I'm like, you got crab legs? You know, like, I don't know. Like, and they're like, what do you want to order? I'm like, crab legs. I'm like, so if he's ordering steaks, you know, maybe the lesson there is, listen, when you want to order steaks when you get older, these are the things it's going to take to be able to do that. And you have that opportunity. You have the opportunity to have a conversation that, you know, actions have outcomes, right? And your choices have outcomes. So if you choose that you want to be able to go out like your dad can and enjoy a steak, then these are the things that you're going to need to focus on and bring some reality in the expenses of life and the choices that he makes, and to be able to build to be able to build wealth, but also to be able to build a business like you have. These are the things, and lay them out to what it takes to get there. As I mentioned earlier, everybody can get to the same end, but what you have to do to get there is completely different and individual to everybody else. And then you have to decide if you're willing to do that. He may decide, hey, look, man, eating steaks isn't worth owning my business, and I want to go out and be part of the Peace Corps. Well, you're making a choice, man, but that's your choice, right? You can't do both. Mm-hmm. So, I think that there's the opportunity to have that conversation then becomes talking about goal setting, talking about outcomes of choices, right? And talking about, because you're getting into bigger conversations, you're getting into 14, 15, 16-year-old conversations, right? The school that he chooses to go to, the subject that he chooses to take when he goes there, paying for, accumulating debt or paying for debt when he goes to do it. Like, if you're servicing large amounts of debt, it's going to change your food choices, right?
That's right.
And it's going to take quite a few years for you to pay these things off, which is, I think that what it does is, no matter the situation, there's always a little bit of a dance around what's appropriate to talk about and those kinds of things. But I think if we go back, it's almost like the rules of money, right? If you go back to the basics, it's okay. If this is what you want, this is what it takes to get there. And let's talk about how you get there. And that way you're now having those conversations, and you're a money talker household, right? You're having these conversations, and not so like my brand, but I'm just saying, like, in general, you're now teaching a framework to get results that you want. And what goes into that framework becomes the choices that they make.
I like that. I like that a lot, Cody. Thank you. By the way, both of my kids, they work hard. So I don't feel like I'm raising spoiled kids, but it is something that I do keep an eye on. It's a little bit of a tricky thing, just like I'm sure it is for people that are struggling and are paycheck to paycheck. It's you want the best for your kids. And so I like your answer a lot. Last question, as we kind of wrap up, we talked about all this stuff, financial discipline and bootstrapping and smart financial decisions and worthwhile educational conversations. Share with us something that you splurge on.
Yeah. I'll bring it back to this, right? That's funny. I got this from my dad. Like, I can remember being early and like I said, I there's some things that I kind of see that recur throughout where I've learned my money stories from, but I splurge on deals. Okay. And what I mean by that is, I don't walk through the mall and go, oh, they're having a sale. Like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't really get me excited, because I know in a week from now, when I walk through by the same store, they're going to have the same permanent sign out front that says they're having a sale. Right. And so, but I have a bit of a wheeler dealer in me, and I think it comes from the entrepreneurial piece. But I remember being in, what was it back then? I think it was Sports Authority back then. And we were in there, and I'm like, Dad, I really want this bat, and he was like, well, how much is that bat? I'm like, it's $100. And he was like, are you crazy? I'm not buying you $100 bat, And so my dad goes and gets the guy, because he was known to do this. So he brings the guy over. He goes, hey, why is this bat $100? And the guy goes through his thing. He goes, what about this one? The guy goes, oh, well, this one's got XYZ. And he goes, well, how much is that one? He goes, $300. And Dad's like, you know what? I'll give you $150 for that bat. And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? We're in a store. Like, you can't. Yeah. The guy goes, well, I can't do that. He goes, well, if you can't do that, go ask the guy that can do that, And so the guy leaves and comes back, and the guy goes, you know what, sir? We're going to sell you that bat for $150. And we walk out of there, and I've got a brand new $300 bat for $150, when he thought it was crazy to pay $100 for a bat for me. Right. And so I have a little bit of that in me, where if I feel like I have been able to wiggle my own deal into something where, like, I'm getting a lot more value than I'm paying for it, but not everybody else is getting it, that's my splurge, man. I can't stop it, because at that point I'm like, all right, well, I feel really good about my purchases. It's not really the number that I pay for something. It's more about what did I get and how did I work a deal? So that's my splurges, man.
That's terrific. Hey, for listeners that want to find your podcast, find out more about the excellent work you do, where do they go?
Man, I appreciate you asking that. And first of all, if you're still listening to this, I appreciate you listening to us financial nerds is going back and forth and talking about money and wealth and families and stuff. It's always very entertaining for me personally to be able to hop on with people such as yourself that are, these high achievers and big thinkers. And I always leave so energized. So, but if you want to find out more about what I do, I have a podcast. It's called Money Talkers. And you can find it on any of the stations, through Apple and Spotify and basically every single one that you can check on. And but also, if you want to connect with me, I'm on all the socials. It's under Cody Loughlin. And then also, if you want to head to themoneytalkers.com, we have some free gifts and things that we send out through there. Just, it takes an email and give you some resources. But if you're looking for ideas to be able to pull the curtain back on some amazing people and giving their advice on how you can talk to your kids and what they struggled with. And then there's actual actionable advice. As you know, Chris, we just went through one with a high impact. It's less than 10-minute listen, and it gives you something to go talk to your kids about all throughout life. And that comes out twice a week. So it takes away the excuses.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I will be back on the next episode of the Simply Financial podcast. Like Cody said, thank you for listening.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.